The slant black shapes of the mountain men stenciled across the stone with a definition austere and implacable, like shapes capable of violating their covenant with the flesh that authored them, and continuing autonomous across the naked rock without reference to sun or man or God. Blood Meridian is definitely not an easy read. Its challenging prose and deeply philosophical themes make it a notoriously dense novel. The density of information that is conveyed through McCarthy's language is remarkable, ensuring that you would discover something new every time you revisit it. If you're unfamiliar with the plot, and spoiler warning, Blood Meridian tells the tale of how a nameless boy joins Glanton's infamous gang of scalp hunters, inspired by the historical Glanton's gang and the infamous history of the Mexican-American War. The scalp hunters take bounties to hunt down Indians, a duty framed as honorable by the local governments. Yet soon the kid realizes that the bounties are merely excuses for the gang to engage in heinous behavior towards practically everyone they encounter. Throughout the narrative, the judge looms as a quasi-leader of the gang and a mysterious polymath who unsettles the kid. Eventually, the gang is ambushed due to their bloated egos, and Glanton is brutally killed like the countless victims he once killed. Fortunately, the kid, who still clings to some sense of morality, survives the ambush. And unfortunately, the judge also survives, and inexplicably begins to hunt down the kid. What follows is a terrifying sequence wherein the judge hunts the kid, who desperately tries to escape the judge's almost universal and omnipotent presence. The ending of Blood Meridian is famously ambiguous. Decades after the previous events, the kid, now a man, encounters the judge once again. After a deeply ambiguous and symbolic dance scene, the judge murders the kid. The readers do not get the full picture, and the novel ends with the haunting line, "He never sleeps, the judge. He is dancing, dancing. He says he will never die." Blood Meridian is about inverting everything that the Western tradition offered. The romanticization of the American cowboys that we often see in popular media is replaced with a brutal, naturalistic narrative about a gang roaming the deserts, engaging in heinous acts of violence, betrayal, and destruction. McCarthy refuses to grant the narrative any chance of romanticization, because the impossibility of redemption and harmony is at the core of this book. The sentences themselves are relentless and convoluted, just like how the protagonist, simply named the Kid, struggles through a world of unending trauma that negates every honorable principle imaginable. Yet accompanying the unflinching naturalism is language reminiscent of the Bible and ancient mythology. Passages depicting violence are followed by lines such as these. The ragged flames fled down the wind as if sucked by some maelstrom out there in the void, some vortex in that waste opposite to which man's transit and his reckonings alike lay abrogates. The book indeed suggests an element of the sublime in this physical world, but it is not a romantic, beautiful sublime, but a terrifying sublime with the capacity to destroy petty humans. Not only do these passages portray McCarthy's masterful use of language, but there is also a clear tension in the writing itself. Hidden within mythological descriptions are more subtle clues of more antagonism and brutality. Only the natural world may transcend the acts of humanity. Yet even that is compromised when the book reminds the readers that humankind is only an insignificant speck in the relentless passing of time and space. Reading Blood Meridian requires you to actively reflect on the language, how it shapes our perception of reality, and the purpose it serves within the narrative. It is not a book written for plot, rather it lets language itself function as the primary driving force of the narrative. Aside from the language, an aspect of the novel unlike anything I had read was its antagonist, Judge Holden. When talking about literary antagonists, complexity is often mentioned as a criterion for well-developed, sophisticated antagonist characters. The judge, however, inverts this paradigm in that his evil is one of the most radical versions of evil in literature, comparable to Iago in Othello or Moby Dick's portrayal of the white whale. The complexity of the judge lies in the universality of his evil. If you try to think of any example of a type of evil, the judge probably manifests it in some capacity. To me, The Judge is a more horrifying creation than portrayals of the devil itself in works such as The Devil and Tom Walker or Faust. Blood Meridian is a work worthy of rigorous analysis because it is in constant conversation with literary and philosophical tradition. McCarthy implicitly and explicitly alludes to the Bible, medieval chivalric romances, classical mythology, and American folklore. His writing style reminds readers of literary voices spanning centuries, from Southern Gothic writers like Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor to Herman Melville and James Joyce and the writers of the New Testament. Some parts of Blood Meridian remind us of the familiar, while other parts take something familiar and invert it in almost uncanny ways. Blood Meridian is an unsettling read. However, its core message is that history and the human condition are themselves unsettling. On a more philosophical level, Blood Meridian made me think about French philosopher Louis Althusser's concept of ideological interpellation. Ideology hails the individual as subjects, constituting subjectivity and ideological control by having the individual feel recognized as subjects. In simpler terms, individuals accept ideological constructs because ideology calls out, "Hey you," and the individual responds to the summons. On some level, the protagonist, because he is simply named the Kid, represents identity formation via interpolation based on the brutal ideologies of the Wild West. His lack of familial ties and other discernible features mark him as a quote-unquote blank slate. Thus, he responds to the "Hey you" hailing of Glanton's gang. We see a character arc in the Kid as he never genuinely accepts the role ideology gave him. His hesitation in accepting the interpolated identity is a hesitation for agency, both bodily and existentially, and as well as his humanity. Ultimately, ideology prevails over the individual, just like how the judge prevails over the Kid in the end, which McCarthy suggests is extremely insignificant against ideology, nature, and fate itself. Even his writing style mirrors this notion. Blood Meridian does not provide us any access to characters' interiority, just like how broader forces of ideology and violence affect the human subject's identity.